Hello and welcome to week 14 of CNET 56. So this week, we're going to, of course, have our discussion, which is your initial response is due by Wednesday, and then your two peer responses are due by Sunday. And then the lecture material will cover network design, security and network design. So you can read through this. Some of this is we've already looked at, like, for example, the proxy server is in here, and some of the network security with our routers and switches. So be sure to read that. And then we have our lab this week, which is lab 14. And that's going to cover DNS and a firewall, which is pfSense. So let me get into VirtualBox here. So what we're going to want to do is clone our CentOS machine. We're going to make 3 clones of this. And before you clone it, make sure that you go into the settings and make sure the network is set to a bridged adapter. And then also make sure you can start it up and that you can log into it, okay? Because we don't want to clone something that we can't access. So, and then once you make sure you can get into it, make sure it's powered off, then you just right click, you click on clone. We want to say generate new MAC addresses. And we're going to name our first clone DNS. And then we want to make it a full clone. So we'll click finish there. And you'll see the progress over here in the upper right-hand corner. And we'll let that finish. And it will show up here in our list. And then you want to do that again for CentOS SSH and CentOS Web, right? Because we're going to use those 3 VMs later on. All right, so this is almost finished. Okay, so then there's my DNS. And then I'm going to clone this one more time. And I'm going to call this one SSH. Make sure I generate a new one. And full clone. Right? And we'll let that go. And while that's running, I'm going to bring over the lab file here and look at it. Okay, so this is week 14's lab. We're going to look at DNS, and then we're going to set up DNS in a Linux environment. And then we're also going to use a router firewall for small medium networks called pfSense. And then we'll use that to do some port forwarding. All right. So there's some write-up in here that talks about DNS, but I'm going to start my 3rd clone, and this is going to be CentOS Web. Generate a new one, full clone. All right, so let's go back to the lab. So DNS is really, it's like the internet's phone book. So it keeps a list of IP addresses and domain names. So one of the types of DNS that we can use is known as a recursive DNS. And what we're going to do is, once we have our DNS cloned, which we have our 3 clones here. So now I'm going to start CentOS DNS. All right, now I'll probably take just a moment to power up. Let's see here. And this will start up, and then I'm going to log into it. And I'm going to open a terminal and type dig www.google.com. All right, so let me get this started up. So the way our DNS is set up here, and we'll see this in the dig, is it's going to use Mount Sachs DNS. And what we're going to do is look at, in the dig command in Linux is similar to the NS lookup command in Windows, where it will show up the information for who has the information for www.google. All right, so I'm going to open a command or a terminal, and I'm going to type dig google.com. And right here, it says the query time is 7 milliseconds. And then on mine, I'm at on my home computer right now, but it's using my home internet router as the server. Now yours should say 10.12.something there for that. Now, notice the response time the first time was 7 milliseconds. If I run dig again, now it stays the same because it's using the same server. So now what I want to do is become the root user, which is su-l, and the password, which should be CNET 2023. And then I'm going to install the bind DNS program and the bind utils. I put a -y on here so it doesn't ask me, do you want to continue, yes or no? I'll put -y and it will go ahead and do it automatically. All right, so that will go download a couple things and then prepare it. And then the next thing I want to do is edit this named.conf. So I'm going to do gedit etc name.conf. All right, and that should open your gedit. And then what I want to do is modify this first area here. So after this 127.0.1, I'm going to add an any and then a semicolon right there and put the, yeah, just like that. Okay, so put a space right there. All right, so I'm going to add that one, and then under this allow query, I'm going to say localhost and then any semicolon, and then at the, I'm also going to say allow query dash cache, and then tab, and then my squiggly bracket, localhost, semicolon, any localhost, close squiggly bracket, and then a semicolon. All right, once that's done, then I'm going to save this file and then exit. And then I'm going to enable the named process. So systemctl named, and then systemctl, and then I'm going to start the name service, which is bind. It's that's the name of the daemon for the bind utility. Okay, then I'm also going to make sure that my firewall is off. So systemctl stop firewall D. Okay, and then I'm going to take a look at my resolve file. So I'm going to type more resolve.conf. And this will tell me what I'm using for my name server. So for my home computer here, I'm using my ISP's, my home internet's router. Okay, so now I'm going to modify this resolve.conf, but first I need to get my address here for this machine. So on mine, it's 254.137. Okay, so I'm gonna remember that 137, and now I'm gonna gedit resolve.conf, and I'm gonna change this name server to my local machine. Okay, and I'm gonna save that and exit. And now I'm going to rerun that dig command. Oh, and so I'm going to go dig www.google.com. And notice the first time it is much, much bigger, right? Much faster. And that's because this DNS on this local machine has never been to Google. It doesn't know where it is. So it has to go all the way out to the internet and back. But watch how much faster it is the second time. So now, because I'm using my local machine, it went from 425 milliseconds, and the other one was 7 milliseconds, down to 1 millisecond. Okay, so that will really improve our performance, is by using a local resolver, right? So that's what we're going to do for that part of our lab. Now, I'm just going to power off. So we're done with our DNS. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to build a pfSense router, right? So what this is going to do is set up our network like this. So here's our host machine. Here's going to be our virtual machine router. And then we're going to have our Windows 10 VM connected to the router, our CentOS SSH connected to our router, and our CentOS web connected to our router, all right? So the first thing we need to do is go download this file from our file share here, and then put it in our ISOs folder. So I have that file somewhere else on my computer. I'll show you that in just a second. But now we're going to create a new virtual machine. And let's call this, let me make this a little bit smaller, just so I can see what I'm doing here. All right, so we're going to click on VirtualBox, and we're going to click New, and we're going to call it pfSense. The type is BSD and FreeBSD 32-bit, and then click next here. Give it at least 1024. One CPU is fine. We're going to use create a new virtual hard disk. We're going to make it 10 gigs. And then we're going to make sure the network adapter is set to use let me see here. Is going to be set to bridge mode. All right. So I'm going to go into my network and change this from NAT to bridge. Remember, the default is NAT. So we're going to change that to bridge. And then we're going to create that VM. And when I start this up, it's going to ask me for an ISO file. And I'll navigate to mine here real quick. All right, so when you see this, you're just going to go to Other, And for mine, I am on my Z drive. And mine is in my CNET56 folder. And it's this I386 image file. So I hit open, mount and retry, and now it will boot up here. All right, so once that's running, what we're going to do is add another internal network card. Okay, so let me come into here. I actually started this a little premature, but let's let this start up, and then I'm going to power it off. Okay. All right, so I'm going to power this off. And what I want to do first on this is add an additional network card and add it to the internal network. So if I come into this PFSense, go into the settings, and then the network, we go to adapter 2 and enable it, and then say internal network, and then hit OK. All right, so now I'm going to start this up. All right, so we did this step. Now I'm going to start it up. It's going to already know where that ISO image file is. All right, so then you'll get this screen here, and we're going to install it using the default values. And then once it boots up, it should have an IP address similar to this. Now mine at home will be a little bit different, but I'll show you that. All right, so now we're going to just run through the setup here. All right, so this will boot, and then we'll accept these settings. Quick, easy install, okay. And it will just go through and set up that router real quick. We'll use the standard kernel. And then this machine is about to be shut down after the machine. Okay, so we're gonna reboot. And then while this is rebooting, we want to come into the optical drive. And once it restarts, watch where it says PFSense is rebooting. Once it syncs the disk, we're going to click on this remove disk from drive. All right. So hopefully I got that. Yeah. So now there's no disk in there. And now it should boot up, and we should see something similar to this screen here. All right. So let's just give it another minute. Hold on, go right here. PFSense. So there it goes. All right, so what this is doing is building our PFSense router. It's going to use, now notice it has its own DNS resolver built into it. And then it starts the DNS resolver like we just did on our Linux, our CentOS box. It does the same thing for performance. And then it should come up and we should see this screen here. And once we see that, we're done with PFSense. All right, so here is my internal network, my LAN, and then my WAN. Now yours will say 10.28.72. something, and you'll want to remember that number. Mine is .138. All right, so I'm going to minimize this, leave that running, but now we can construct the rest of our network. So let's go to our Windows 10, our CentOS and SSH and our CentOS web VMs. So I'm going to go to my Windows 10. I'm going to go into the settings, and I'm going to move this network from the bridge to the internal. Okay. And I'm going to start that up. And then I'm going to go to my CentOS SSH, do the same thing, change it from bridge to internal, and then start that one up, and then do the same thing for the web. All right, so once that's good, come into the settings here, network from bridge to internal, and start that one up as well. All right, so now make sure, come into your VMs here. So here, and I'm going to log on to my machine here. And you can see my CentOS is starting up in the background as well. But I'm going to log on to Windows. And I want to double check my network setting here. So so this tells me it's on a new network, right? It said, hey, you're on a new network. What do you want to do? So I'm going to go into my details here. OneDrive giving me an issues. But anyway, look at the details. And now I'm on the 1.100. Now, if you get this error here that says your Windows is about to expire soon, that's because the license is only valid for a few more days. And the start of next week's lab, we'll fix that. But for today, we'll leave it like it is. So now I'm on 1.100 for this machine. All right. And now that I have my system set up, I'm going to use my Windows 10 VM to install or set up my virtual machine. All right, so I'm going to make this full screen. And as you probably guessed, we need to download and install Chrome. So I'm going to search for Chrome. Chrome download. And download Chrome. Notice how Microsoft's like, hey, use Edge instead. But let's do download now. So again, this is on my Windows 10 VM. So we'll run through the setup real quick. All right. It should be downloading Chrome. Let's check it. It's not getting it yet. And that's giving me a problem for some reason. Right. So doesn't seem to like this Bing search very much. I'm going to switch to. All right. So I found out you can use Edge if you want to. So that will save you one step. So once you get Edge on there, you want to go to the website of your pfSense router, which is, it'll be this address here, right? The 192.168.1.1. And then come into details and go to the website. And then you want to log in as admin with the password of pfSense. Okay. And now click through the welcome screens and setup wizards by accepting all the default settings here. So let's go here. And now everything is all set up. And then the next thing we want to do is click on interfaces WAN, scroll to the bottom and uncheck the private and bogon addresses. Okay, so let's come into here. We're going to come down to our WAN interface here. And then scroll to the bottom and uncheck block private and block bogon. And then save that. Okay, then apply the changes. Okay. So that, and then once that's done, we can minimize that. All right, so next we're going to go into our machine here. So we'll minimize Edge. And we want to set up a remote desktop. So we're going to go into our system. You see how I tell you to do that. So, okay, you need to enable RDB access account on your Windows 10, and then enable the SSH and then HTTP on the CentOS. So let's do RDP first. So let's go into our Windows machine. And if we look at this PC properties, that will give us the remote tab here. where we can do remote settings, and then we want to allow that. And the user, CNET56 already has permission. So that allows remote access, remote desktop, okay? So now the only other thing I need on this machine is to get the IP address. So this one is 1.100. So I'm going to come into my lab here and type in my and the port for RDP, if you didn't know that already, is 3389. All right. So then I'm going to come into set my CentOS SSH machine here. And I'm going to get its IP address. Now, remember, SSH is enabled by default. And we've also installed our web server on here already, but let's just double check something here. So I'll make sure the firewall's off with the systemctl. And it's going to ask me for authentication. And I probably should do this as root. Systemctl, stop, firewall, B. All right. And then I need my address. So SSH is 101. So I'm going to come in here. And we know that SSH is on port 22. Now, just for the fun of it, let's make sure we can SSH in our local host. We'll say yes. Okay, hold on. So I'm going to SSH as a CNET56 user. All right, so now I'm able to get in that way. All right, so we know SSH is working. Now I'm going to minimize this one. Then I'm going to go over to my web server, which is here. Log in. I'm going to get the IP address, and I'm going to make sure I have a web server running on this, which it should. We did this in like the second lab that we did anything. So I'm going to do become root. And I'm going to do ifconfig. So 102. 192.168.1.102. And the port for the web is port 80. All right, so now let's double check and make sure I have a web server on here. So to do that, I'm just going to open my Firefox and CentOS. So, and then I'm going to put in here local loss, and helps if you could spell localhost, and that gives us that test page. Okay, so that's good. All right, so now that I have all of those services running, I'm going to go into back in pfSense, and I'm going to click on Firewall NAT, click on Add, and then select the proper service or proper from and to port under destination range for the service. So the way that works is we'll come back into our Windows 10 and close that. And I'm going to come back into my, here, I'm going to go Firewall, and then I'm going to do NAT, right? So Firewall NAT to create a new rule. We're going to click on Add. So we'll click on Add, and then we're going to say the destination port range. So I'm going to say from port our Microsoft Remote Desktop to the port, and I'm going to redirect that to the 1.100. Okay, so the from port to port, and then I'm going to hit save. Okay, from port to port, and then enter the appropriate IP address. So like here I have 1.100, and then the redirect target port. I didn't do that part, so let me do that. Yeah, and it gave me an error. It says, hey, you have to tell it what do you want to redirect, and that's going to be Microsoft Remote Desktop. Right now, click Save, and then Apply Changes. All right, so now I have anything coming from the WAN is going to go out to the accordingly. All right, so protocol TCP. And then we'll do the same thing for the other ones. All right, so let me just double check something here. And okay, yeah, that looks good. So I'm going to do another one for SSH. And that's going to be SSH, SSH, it's going to go to 101. And the port is going to be SSH. All right, and I'm going to add a third one. Oh, and I made a mistake on that last one. I'll come back and fix that. So the last one's going to be web, HTTP to HTTP. (102) HTTP. Let me fix this one. Need 101. And that looks good. All right. So now I'm going to apply these changes. So I have 3 rules here. One for the web goes to this device, WAN, the SSH this device, and then finally remote desktop to that device. All right. So now what I want to do is from your host machine, you should now be able to access the services from the internal network. So what you'll do is open RDP on your host machine, but put in the IP address of your pfSense firewall. Okay, so like here, mine, I'll put in the address of 192.168.254.138. So let's check this out. So if I go into remote desktop, and if I put the address here of my pfSense router, 192.168.254.138, this should connect me to my, put in a typo again, 254. One 192.168.254.138, and that will connect me to my Windows 10 VM, right? So, and then you'll say yes to that. And then this will show me the desktop of my VM I was just working on. All right, so that tells you we're in there. So now I'm going to close that. So remote desktop worked. Now I'm going to access SSH. So I should be able to do that using PuTTY. So I'm going to do PuTTY SSH, and I'm going to put in that 192.168.254.138. Now on yours, this will be the address of your pfSense router. Okay, I'm going to hit open. I'm going to hit accept, and I'm going to log in as CNET56, my password, and I am on my CentOS box. I can exit that. And then finally, we're going to try the web. So now, if I open a browser here, and I put in the tab 192.168, and again, your IP address will be 10.28.72. Whatever yours is, but now notice how that redirected me to my CentOS virtual machine, right? So if all that works, have me come by and I'll type in my initials here, and that way we know that your lab worked properly, right? So I'm going to not save that. And that's what we're going to do in this week's lab and in this week's lecture. You'll look at all this stuff. All right, so take care, and I will talk to you later. All right, bye.